All right, good morning. Lien is on her way back, but I will start a while so we can stay on schedule. My name's Whitney Smith. I'm a consultant. I work with the Infosys Foundation USA. I've been working with them for the last 3 years, and I'm happy to be your host today in the room for this workshop. I'm going to do a quick introduction of our moderators and our panelists, and I'm going to turn it over to them for the next hour. The first person is our moderator, Gregg Fleisher. Gregg is at the National Math and Science Institute and works as a liaison with senior school district leaders, state and national STEM ed partners, and public and private funders, focusing on strategic direction and oversight of the National Math and Science Initiative's core programs. Is that okay? Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
These are boring little paragraphs. I wish I knew more, like what your favorite color was, or
blue.
Whether you like Indian food, or
no.
Cameron Wilson is here. Hi, Cameron. Cameron is with Code.org. He's the COO and president and oversees advocacy and outreach and operations for Code.org and help guide the organization's efforts to expand access to K-12 CS education around our country. Lien, you have the shortest bio in this package. I'm going to ask you a question. Lien Diaz is the Senior Director of AP Program at College Board. That's all it says for me. Do you like Indian food? Your favorite color? Okay, great. You all tell a little bit about yourselves, too. And Bradley Beth is with UTeach Computer Science. He is the curriculum specialist for UTeach Computer Science and previously was the program coordinator for Project Engage, which is a joint partnership with the University of Texas, Austin's Department of CS, the College Education, and On-Ramps. And that you are the primary developer of Thriving in Our Digital World course. And last but not least, Ralph is the principal investigator of the Mobile CSP project, which is an NSF-funded effort to train high school teachers in CT and elsewhere, in Connecticut and elsewhere, as a means of broadening participation in K-12 CS at Trinity College. Okay, take it away.
Welcome. So, Lien, I'm going to start with you. So, CSP, the launch was by far the biggest launch of any AP course in the College Board's history. What exactly do you attribute all that to?
So, I think that that there were a lot of collaborative efforts, right, in not just pushing CS for All, but in the development of this course over the last 8.5 years, building that community, partnerships with professional organizations, getting the word out, doing teacher training. So in all of that, there were a few key things, at least at College Board, was very strategic at doing. One was forming partnerships with curriculum developers, curriculum and professional development projects, like Ralph's project, like Bradley's project that they're going to talk about. They developed very specific curriculum to teach computer science principles based on the curriculum framework. And also developed, teacher training models, professional development, to help teachers better understand how to implement that content in the classroom. And there are several others as well, too, that aren't represented on here, but currently there are 8 of those types of partnerships. So teachers have, the flexibility in many ways to choose any programming language that they want to use in their classrooms with their students, and also to select from a variety of curriculum that uses a variety of pedagogy and programming languages. The Beauty and Joy of Computing at UC Berkeley as well is part of that. And so we urge teachers to make the selection of curriculum and instruction really based on the needs of their students. And so, that was one thing. We thought that was really important. And then the other thing was really working very closely with the CS education community at all levels. Higher ed, that involvement throughout the development and the support of this course was very key, right? one of the main reasons that students take an AP course is because they're on a pathway or on a trajectory to go to post-secondary education, to study, to go to college, right? So we gained some support there. Partnerships with code.org that helped us get states involved and really, make this an important thing for them. I think those were some key strategies that we did.
Are you open to, you said there's 8 partnerships. Do you think that you're going to stick with those 8, or are there others banging at the College Board's door?
Well, I think that the current 8 that we have now are pretty solid because there's been many years of development and piloting with the ones that are currently that have been reviewed. I am pretty confident that there are going to be more. Eventually there might be a big list of just a variety of curricula, right? Like any other course. I mean, this is so brand new. So the important thing is that there's a place for teachers to start. There's a place for schools to obtain that information and those resources. So I think it's a good starting point, and there may or may not be additional ones, but I think the 8 that we have are pretty solid.
So the next question is going to be for Ralph, Bradley, and Cameron. You're all curriculum providers of AP CSP. What have you found to be the most difficult concepts that the teachers have been, or that they've been having a difficult time trying to grasp? What have been the easiest? And for the ones that are most difficult, how are you going to alter anything in the future to try to get them to maybe grasp that easier? So Ralph, why don't we start with you, sir?
Okay, but before I do that, I want to add something to what Lynn said about why this was the biggest rollout in College Board history. I think a lot of the credit for that has to go to Lynn for the leadership she put in. I mean, this was, as she mentioned, a community effort, and she pulled together this community and managed it, and it's a little bit like herding cats, or a lot like herding cats. And that went on for 7 or 8 years, right? I know we first got involved with it in 2011 with as one of the piloting sites. The other huge amount of credit has to go to the National Science Foundation and Jan Cooney for not only funding the development of the CS Principles course with the College Board and working with that team, co-led by Owen Ostrakhan at CS Principles, but also funding many of the providers that are now providing curricula. So that was happening at the same time, and I think both of those things coming together in the way they did over those many years had a big role too. So what are the most difficult concepts? Well, I don't know whether you all know, but there's 7 big ideas in the curriculum for the CS Principles. There's abstraction, algorithms, programming, data, impact, internet, and creativity. I'd say initially the hardest was abstraction because there's lots of ways that's represented in computer science, both in terms of procedural abstraction and programming, but also in terms of data abstraction when you work with data, and the course focuses on both of those, but also more broadly in terms of abstractions in hardware and software. So it's all through that curriculum, all through that framework, and I think it's something of a challenge to sort of pull that all together and how that fits together as the idea of abstraction. I think some parts of teaching algorithms and binary numbers is challenging. I would say the easiest concepts is the creativity and the different ways that different curricula sort of address that. In our case, our project is called Mobile Computer Science Principles, and we use App Inventor as a programming language so students can build their own apps right from the start. And I think that really lets them express themselves in ways that are meaningful to them. And I'd say that's made as someone who's taught computer science for 35 years at college level, I'd say that's a huge difference from the way it's usually taught. And teachers, I think, buy into that, students buy into that, and I think that's really been a big factor in why this has been such a successful course.
Bradley?
So, I'm going to go off the rails a little bit and say that there's no like one concept or even strand of concepts I've seen that teachers monolithically have had issue with. What I think, in our experience, has been the major issue, or I don't want to say issue, but sort of hurdle in getting teachers to successfully teach our flavor of the course is pedagogy training. So we use a project-based learning approach. We use the sort of Buck Institute model for that. And we have 6 units, each of which is roughly 5-ish weeks. And there's an overarching unit project that sort of is supposed to encompass the instruction for each of those particular content units. And, teachers don't have to religiously follow that in order to implement the course, but the course was designed from that standpoint. And really training teachers to teach computer science using that particular pedagogical model has been the most difficult thing. Even more generally, teaching them to teach computer science using an inquiry-based approach at all, as you go from sort of activity to activity, there's the overarching project, but then there are sort of daily activities that you have as well. And in our course, most of these are presented in an inquiry-based approach. Has been pretty difficult for many teachers, particularly teachers who are experienced in teaching traditional computer programming courses, because they tend to teach computer programming in a procedural way, and an inquiry-based approach, which is more open-ended, is difficult and outside of their usual realm of experience. And kind of the last point I want to say about this is, our curriculum is called UTeach CS Principles, and for a long time that's sort of been the focus of what we do. I think now we're starting to realize that really the important part, like sustaining this across however long it's going to last, is the PD component and the teacher support. When we do a PD, so we have teachers for 5 days in the summer to do a professional development. We cannot teach them computer science in 5 days. We can't even teach them our curriculum in 5 days. And we definitely can't teach them how to be expert programmers in 5 days. So that's basically, we've stepped back, and that's not the focus of what we do. The focus of what we do is teach them to be able to feel comfortable in engaging with the curriculum, with taking the curriculum as a starting point and adjusting it for their local populations and their local interests and abilities, because you may get a teacher who's a social studies teacher, and they can teach this course, and they can be successful teaching it. And the way to do that is to teach it as a social studies teacher would teach it, not a sort of a like, this is how you teach CSP, and give them the same sort of experience that someone who is an experienced computer science teacher would bring to the table. So that's really been our focus, is focusing on teachers and leveraging their strengths, as opposed to sort of a deficit model where they come to you and you're like, okay, what are the things we need to get you to know to get up to speed? It's more like, what are the strengths that you bring that you can leverage to teach this course? And it may be difficult to sort of get up to speed on programming or certain things like that, and that requires initiative. We've been doing this project for 5 years though, and I've only seen 2 instances, 2 teachers where I would say, yeah, it kind of failed and didn't really work for them. But the rest of the time, the teachers are professionals, and they bring a wealth of knowledge to the table that as a curriculum writer, don't have access to. So that's a big assumption that we bring, is that they're going to be bringing a lot of outside knowledge and abilities that they can leverage in the classroom, and we encourage them to do that. I think in this particular case, when you have teachers who come from social studies or whatever, some sort of ancillary to computer science world, they're really nervous. They're uncomfortable with the fact that some of their students are going to come to the table knowing more than they do, and it sort of takes some reprogramming, if you will, to get them to realize that they're not just up there conveying information, but they're basically guiding the students to engage with the content, with the sort of CSP experience. If you've read through the framework, you'll know it's an experience rather than like a strict content-based framework, and that's what's important. And having students that know more than you can actually be a strength, can be a good thing, because you can leverage that, and it sort of challenges you to be able to think about teaching something in a different way than you did, that you can write out in a lesson plan before you get to class and teach the same content 7 times that day. Each class is different.
Bradley, does everyone who uses the UTeach CS curriculum, everyone uses it as inquiry-based?
Well, I mean, that's the idea, and that's how it's written. Of course, once you have the teachers and you train them, and we support our teachers throughout the year, but we say there's no one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach. And me sitting at my desk writing a curriculum, not knowing who's going to be implementing it, who the audience is, I realized that from the start. So they're encouraged to deviate from this sort of, template as much as they need to. And we try to support them in that. But there are some core tenets that we highly suggest that they implement. And then if they need to modify and go off that to meet their population's needs, they can do so. But inquiry-based approach is definitely one of the things that we say you should very much try to implement that with fidelity if you can.
Cameron, what about code.org? What's been, I know there you have a tremendous amount of teachers using that curriculum. What have you found to be the most difficult and easiest, and are you going to adjust anything with the ones that are most difficult?
Thanks, Gregg. First, apologies. Someone from our curriculum team couldn't be here, so I'm going to try to represent their views. I'm not a curriculum specialist. Second, I'll give you general observations. We haven't collected specific data on this yet. We're still digging into the experience from this year. I think at a high level, the first thing is this meta issue, which is there is so much meat in the CSP framework, so many learning objectives. One of the hardest things is actually designing a curriculum and trying to figure out how do you build a year-long course and the pacing and what's highlighted. Like all of our different curriculum are going to hit on different things because we're all sort of guessing as to what is the specific set of learning objectives we need to cover. How deep of the programming experience do we need to get into, because we're all sort of shooting in the dark at an assessment from the College Board, trying to figure out what that is going to look like when the curriculum was being piloted and designed. So, that's a major challenge that we sort of wrestled with. Within the context of the curriculum we built, I think one of the surprising things was not that this was an easy thing to teach, but the programming piece was expected of teachers. We put a lot of supports in it, and teachers really enjoyed that piece and learning that piece. So I wouldn't call it easy, but it was definitely something that was, I think, not as hard as like abstraction. I totally agree on abstraction. That was because that concept is cross-cutting across a bunch of the different pieces of CSP, and it's also a tool that you use. And is it a concept, is it a tool? It's a very complicated thing to sort of get across to teachers. So that was a big part of it. Interestingly, two other things we found, observations from teachers, were, number one, student writing. There's a big writing component, student journaling. Part of the transformation of CSP and the College Board was they have performance tasks. They actually have to write these things up. Student writing was a big challenge for our teachers. And then the second is just the AP prep. And so in that case, the specific strategy we'll adjust is in the summer, we'll start teachers thinking about what their pathway of AP prep is. Not something we did last year. We'll start doing it again this year. We'll start just getting them thinking like, how are you going to be thinking about AP prep for your students? And then whatever they design in the summer, we'll circle back with in the follow-up PD workshops during the school year to see kind of where they are. So I think we're figuring out how to support the writing a little bit better, but that's a bigger, broader issue in education generally. And then this AP prep is definitely something we see as a big challenge.
That sounds great. Lien. So there's talk in the CS community. I've heard it by many folks who have spent a lot of time and energy and money in trying to make sure that everything fits the framework beautifully. But there's talk in the community that that it's that some of the key aspects of the course are going to change. Especially I think related around the performance task. I've heard it, by more than one or two folks. So where do you see how this course is going to be different in the next year, in the coming year, in 3 years, 5 years? What do you see?
Well, you give me the tough ones, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, CSP is in a very unique situation right now. We just launched the first AP CSP exam, right? It's the first multiple choice exam that kids have taken. And also it's the first time that students have, officially completed these performance tasks, right? So during the pilot years, when we piloted the assessments, we were gathering data, and right before the launch of the course, or actually right at the launch of the course, we discovered that there were some issues with the scoring guidelines, right? I don't know if any of you teachers that are here remember that or recall that with one of the performance tasks. And it's very important for our AP exams to have the reliability and the validity, right, across all of our AP exams. But we needed to do the best we could for CSP. So we had to change the rubric. We had to change the rubric for one of the performance tasks, which kind of elicited some questions about, is this the best that we can do with these assessments? So I think moving forward, after this first year, you might see some collective discussions about, what do we do to continue improving on and making sure that the at least the performance tasks are the best that they can be. I will say that change is not going to come quickly. If there are any changes, it can't, right? We need a few years of consistency, gathering some data, performance data, and we'll learn more this year in June. In a couple of weeks, we're convening over 350, I would say approximately 350 teachers in Kansas City to help us score close to 100,000 performance tasks, right? And we'll learn more about how those scoring guidelines are functioning and then make adjustments as needed as we move forward. So I would say that's the first thing that might, be revised or looked at with a careful eye. I'm sorry. Okay, does this help? Yeah? Sorry. Yeah. I would say another thing to kind of consider as well, and this is long term, from my perspective, this would be something, of a longer term, is working very closely with college professors at the post-secondary level to, figure out what's going to happen with that landscape. We have commitments, and we have been talking to hundreds of, college professors in terms of that alignment to their intro-level CS courses for credit and placement policies. That is going to be ongoing. And through that work, if we find that professors are requesting or asking for something else, then that adjustment might be needed too. But that's not, going to happen overnight. That takes a long time, and our goal is to be aligned with those courses so that students have that opportunity to get that credit and placement. It's a clearer pathway for students, right, to be studying STEM and CS if we do that.
So this is for anyone who wants to take this. So my hunch is that the pass rates are going to be shockingly and woefully low. I don't have any data on the actual exam. I know I'm very confident with all the work that the College Board put into it. It's a very appropriate exam. I could explain my hunch if you really want to know. But if that's the case, which we'll know in 2 months, what needs to happen if the pass rate is nationally around 35% and much lower for free and reduced lunch students?
I think Lien should take the first whack.
Well, so I'm not sure if that's my prediction. I mean, I do think you said it was an appropriate exam. I do think it's a really good exam. We had wonderful folks working on developing this exam now over several years. We're now starting to build the additional forms for next year and the following year. And they've gotten better. I mean, just really honing in on really good questions and making that exam, a really good exam. I think that there's going to be some good distribution of achievement. We'll have to wait and see more about what the demographic of the students tells us, right? But I think there's going to be a good distribution. For students or those schools, that are struggling, maybe have low achievement data, I do think that this idea of continued teacher support throughout the school year, rather than just, a week in the summer and maybe a couple days in the fall. In addition to that, I do think thinking carefully about teacher support throughout the school year, I think is important too. So any resources out there available, anything online or easily accessible for teachers, I think will help with that improvement in achievement data. Supporting the teachers will also help support the students.
Why don't we go down the line and why don't we predict the, since we have this on video, predict the passing rates. I'm going to say it's 43.4. 43.42.
Brandon.
So you want me to go next? So I think we'll have higher than a 50% passing rate. Gregg and I debated this last night. So and we're going to have to create a bet over some Indian food.
Yeah, I lose. If,
yeah. As to what the final number is. Talking to our curriculum team, we're a little bit fearful of the opposite, which is pass rate might be a little bit high, and then questions, particularly coming from higher ed, as to where the alignment is on the CSX courses. Are these really replacing our credit and placement really valid or not? I think that's one of the concerns. Lien articulated a little bit. It's a big concern for us, and as we scale this course, and whether this is really going to be accepted by the higher ed community. So I think it'll be higher than that. I don't know if this is a shameless plug for NIMSY, but you have pretty good student interventions around getting AP test scores up. So if you open up a CSP front, we'd be happy to start to think about that.
Sounds great. What do you think, Bradley?
I think they're going to be not shockingly low. I think they're going to be good, and I base this on just what our teachers came to us after the exam and said our students feel really confident, and so and of course our teachers didn't teach 50,000 students. I don't know how that's going to play across the spectrum, but if the students are confident that they did fairly well, and then they end up not doing fairly well, then we clearly have serious issues. But again, goes back to the teachers and students who are out in the field. I trust their perspective, and I think that they didn't say it was super easy, but they feel like they did well, and they even said there were things that they were unsure about, but generally they felt that they did well. The performance task piece, I think, is more up in the air. It's much easier to feel like you did well on a multiple choice exam than it is to put something out there that's open-ended that you've put some of yourself into, and it's going to be graded by some people behind a curtain. But yeah, I think they're going to be good.
Ralph, what do you think?
I think it's going to be better than the Red Sox current winning percentage, which is they're playing 500 ball. I think it's going to get up to the 60% range. But I also want to follow up on this question of how this is going to be accepted in higher ed. I mean, this course really is a new beast for computer science. Dave was talking about this in the previous panel. This is not how we traditionally have taught computer science in higher ed. Actually, we taught it wrong because you take the CS1 course, mostly you slog away for a whole semester using the command line or some programming platform, and you maybe at the end of the semester, if you're lucky, get to write a program that resembles anything you might use on your phone or on your computer. And students are told to bear with it for 3 or 4 years, and you'll eventually see how rewarding this all is and satisfying. And in this course, you start off from day one creating, and that's a totally different experience. And you also then have these portfolios and these performance tasks, which aren't done in traditional CS and higher ed. So, and I've talked to some people at universities where they look at this course and say, we don't have anything like that in our major. We accept this course in our major at Trinity, and I think a few schools do, but most schools don't accept a distribution course like this that appeals to broadly, students in different majors towards the CS major. So I do worry about that issue. I don't know how the scores on it will affect that, if at all, but I think that is lurking.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
So just to follow up on that too, I mean, a large premise for creating the computer science principles course was based on research that showed this community that approaching the teaching of computer science through just programming was detrimental, really, for diversity, for gender equity. And so I want to clarify that. So that's that research. We took a look at it. We talked to a whole bunch of computer science education experts. You know what they said? They said, you know what, programming is still important. So computer science principles has that balance, though. I think that there is a perception, in particular at the higher ed level, that computer science principles does not focus on programming or programming skills. And, for many years, we did talk about teaching computer science principles sort of void of programming, right? It's not the right way. I think we need to change that rhetoric, in particular with computer science principles. CSP does include very important programming concepts, very important, with the algorithms and the abstractions, the development of the abstractions. Those concepts have to be integrated with programming, with any programming language, right? Those are key in our assessments as well. They're key in the AP multiple choice exam and in the create task. And so I think when talking to higher ed folks, I think we kind of have to change that language or the way we approach it, and so that they don't have that perception that it doesn't have programming, thus it's not rigorous, thus it's not, a valid course. So that was my point.
Yeah, so so you all have the advantage of a lot more inside information as far as Bradley getting teacher feedback and things like that. The hunch is really looking at it from an economist's viewpoint, that the last time that the College Board rolled out a course that the education community perceived as easier than an existing one, and that the perception is that CSP is more accessible and therefore potentially easier than CSA for students to do well in. Last time that happened was when Physics B separated in Physics 1 and Physics 2. There was a proliferation of students in Physics 1 that was where the education community put a lot of students in there, and that pass rate I think initially was like 37%. So, and the other reason is I just heard recently that Dan Garcia said that the test was appropriate for Berkeley students, so that solidified my my 43.4 students. But
That's some insider.
yeah. But I but I learned that after the conversation last night. So I firmly believe I lobbied my own kid's school. You're much more of a prophet outside outside where you live. Like, I think this course really needs to be in every single school in the country. I just think it's as fundamental for the entire populace to know this base of computer science as it is reading and writing. So what do you see the biggest barriers that exist? I know that David Coleman from the College Board, this is one of his initiatives. He would like to see this in every school. What do you think the biggest barriers are from that actually occurring within 5 years? Cameron, why don't we start with you?
So in every school is really hard if we're going to keep the AP label on it.
Why is that?
So if you look at calculus is the highest penetration in the U.S. Calculus AB is in 14,000 secondary schools. There's 37,000 high schools, private and public, in the U.S. So the penetration rate is just under 50%, or actually it's under 40% for that. It's hard, I think, as we've scaled, one of the things that we've consistently found is a lot of schools I'm not sure AP is right for me. So there's an open question, do they teach it as a non-AP course, which is something that's possible, or do they continue to go down the AP route and add it and sort of break through those cultural barriers? I mean, that's a major challenge, and I think it's sort of cultural to the schools, and definitely we're trying to address that with our local partners and marketing for schools and how to market and how to get to schools. I don't disagree with the idea that this is a course that could be in every school. It's certainly one of the goals that we'd like to see is multiple providers being able to get AP computer science in every school. So I think that's a major issue. And then I was just on this panel on policy. There's a whole bunch of sort of ancillary policy issues. Funding, like how are we going to fund professional development around computer science? How are we going to certify teachers in this space? And how principals, superintendents think about, is this part of the core curriculum or not? And all of those things are sort of tied together.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Ralph.
If I can add to that. So I've been working in this area now since 2011, and I thought I understood the challenges, but I think they're actually even harder than I thought they were, and that is the challenge of training enough qualified teachers to teach this. We were just at a meeting in Connecticut at which the assistant superintendent told us that in STEM, not computer science, STEM, in some school districts, STEM subjects are taught by daily substitutes. In other words, they don't even have enough qualified STEM teachers. And what we're doing, our strategy has been to try to recruit people from STEM subjects, math and sciences, to learn computer science and teach that. So I think there's really a huge challenge to get enough teachers trained, not only in CS, but apparently even more broadly than that.
So I think there are lots of operational obstacles that people are talking about, but I think there are some more fundamental issues that kind of color that, which are like motivations. We can't even agree on why this is important. So I wish Lien Diaz were here, because the CS for All Consortium actually has studied this, and there are 7 different strands of why different stakeholders think this whole issue is important. and they're not always, agreeable to one another. If a funder is coming and they think jobs are the important thing, and that's what we need to push, that's sort of a different approach than the equity sort of citizenship approach or cybersecurity or all these different motivations that people are bringing to the table. So can we scale it everywhere? I think we can, but I think that we're going to need to come together. We have a lot of growing to do as a community to come together to establish some core principles and beliefs and motivations about why this is important in the first place.
Thanks. We're going to open it up to audience questions. Whitney is going to pass around the mic. Incentives for the best question.
Just make sure to keep the mic near your face so you're on video.
Hi, Dan Garcia, UC Berkeley, Beauty and Joy Computing, and CS Principals Development Committee. I think it's important to know that there has yet to be a feedback loop for all of the folks involved, all the people who are running curriculum, all the folks who are teachers at the ground level, and all the students who are taking it. Yes, you had some sample exams out there, but again, we've talked about how hard it is to know how these performance tasks are going to be graded. I think you have to not look at whatever the numbers are going to be generated in terms of pass rates and scores this year. I mean, I hope they all do well. I hope all the students succeed. I hope every student who took the course, aced it and did great and is going to go on to success after that. But I think there has to be a couple of years of feedback, and I do hope that there's a process where each teacher will know how they did, and that can then aggregate to the curriculum providers to know, if one of the curriculums isn't covering internet well, then all those kids aren't going to do well in the internet section. That feedback loop has to be there. So I hope that that's being built into place in all the ways of communication. The numbers are going to be fed back to those stakeholders so that folks can adjust their stuff, right? Bradley and Ralph and I will adjust ours. If all the BJC folks are not doing well on one particular big idea, we're going to hit that as hard as we can this summer and then revise that. So that loop has to happen, and it hasn't yet happened. So we need to get the numbers out. That loop has to take effect. And steady state is 3 years, 4 years. Then we'll kind of ask those questions and how well those things are doing.
That's a great question. We actually, at the National Math and Science, we are going to attempt, I know we're supporting code.org with this, really to try to do a pretty good analysis for all the curriculum providers if they will give us, which schools that they're in so that we can be able to give that. I don't know if the College Board would be interested in doing that, but that's something that we're very interested in doing. So.
This is Patty Ordonez from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. And so we don't have, AP in Puerto Rico yet. And seeing this, I see a lot of competition, which is very typical in computer science. And I guess I want to say something that not every curriculum will fit every community or every. So I think it would be very important to, and when you're doing this analysis, to actually do the analysis per community as well, not just overall, but actually look at which curriculums might work best for which communities, and look at which curriculums might do well in certain aspects, and consider, trying to create a joint curriculum out of all the independent ones, because maybe some of you do really well in abstraction, and some of you do really well in programming, and kind of grab the best of all to, create, because really this, hearing that, oh no, I don't think this will be in all schools, that goes against the concept of having CS for all. And so the idea would be to create a curriculum that maybe in some communities might take 2 years to cover, but that every student would have an opportunity to have access to those. And I guess I would love to hear how you guys would feel about doing something like that type of collaboration and that type of analysis.
Yeah, so I'm going to lead it off. I think that the NSF-funded projects, I think they were all research-based, and I'm not sure that type of collaboration. I understand exactly what you're asking, and it's something that we actually try to do. But I think it's, I'll let them speak to it, but I'm not sure that they're going to borrow from each other, or maybe they may get some ideas from each other. But go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, so we've already been doing something like that. So Dan at Berkeley got a small grant last year, and all of us participated in that to focus on the impact big idea. And we shared our various materials on that and put them together in a repository that we can now draw from. And I think that's actually one of the strongest parts of the curriculum compared to, say, a traditional CS course, because you're talking about, how does computing affect your everyday life and your privacy and so on. So these students and teachers really get into that. So we've been doing that, and we'll continue, I think, hope to look for other ways to, share resources.
So your comment made me think of, we have so many efforts, right? There are a few really good curricula, or the ones that we've reviewed. And, the resources are out there. It's really a matter of coordinating ourselves to do that collaboration and figuring out the right pathway or the right resources to put together for your students or for your community, right? So there's a gap there. I mean, I think it's happening in some local spaces, in some school districts, in some cities, but it's not happening across the board. So I think it's important for us to consider really coming together in some organized way as some center something, so that we can organize that and coordinate that, make it specific to like your community, your students. That's a great point. Yeah.
I just want to broaden this a little bit to your point. First off, when I talked about how the difficulty of getting AP into schools, I don't want to suggest that every school shouldn't teach computer science, because that is absolutely our goal. There's just an open question. Is it CSP? I think you'll talk to states, and states will tell you different things. They might have different ideas around what their computer science, based on their state standards for computer science education. We need, as a community, to be respectful of that. That's one of the reasons why the community came together to pull together the K-12 CS framework. It was exactly to try to develop what are the concepts and practices we think every student should be able to learn by the time they graduate. And then then states could build standards around that, and then curriculum providers could end up building around that. But certainly community efforts to help bring those things together are certainly welcome and warranted. Our stuff is all open source. I'm happy to share it, and that it's under a Creative Commons license, so people can actually adapt it to their needs locally, whether it's Puerto Rico or Iowa or Florida. It really doesn't make a difference to us.
And as we get to the next question, we're actually going to do the analysis based on different demographics, matching students and things like that.
Hi, I'm Trisha Williams, member of the California State Board of Education, and I got pulled into computer science 3 years ago by Hadi Partovi, who approached the state board wanting to talk with us about its importance. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about it as a member of the State Board of Education, because we're grappling with what our next steps are, and right now we're grappling with whether or not the governor is going to fund the next step that we're ready to take in terms of creating some kind of computer science standards. But in particular, I wanted to address two things that were said. One that you said, that you talked about in terms of the community having different perspectives about why it was important for all students to have it. And you mentioned workforce and you mentioned equity. And I would say for myself, as I've delved pretty deeply into thinking about this for the last 3 years, I think all of those are reasons. For myself, I have there are no conflicts for me, especially being in California, to think that this will be an enhancement for workforce participation, for recruitment for workforce, for their workforce needs, and that for the low-income kids in California, again, it can be an important social mobility avenue for them that they haven't had before if they have the experience in high school, as well as, which makes that kind of directly connected to the equity issues, including girls and students of color and low income and English learners. But as well, I think of it, the more I learned about it, and I participated as a stakeholder on the CS K-12 framework, the more I learn about it, the more how I also was involved in California adopting next generation science standards. I was the lead on that, and on getting computer science and computational thinking and modeling and simulation into those standards and into our curriculum framework. So I think of it as an important learning opportunity for students. I think all of those things are reasons to do it. But I was also struck by the comment about whether we could actually ever get it into all schools. And the things Cameron said about the policies and politics and local context and all of that are certainly important. But one of the, I think, a perspective I have, which I want to translate into a question for you is, because maybe I misunderstand something here, but I know computer science principles is an AP course. But when my own sons were in college, they chose which AP courses they took based upon their interest and whether or not they wanted to get college credit for them. The AP part was the college credit part. In addition, it enhanced their application for, UC schools if they had more APs. But it didn't necessarily change what they learned in the course to a great extent. In other words, they took some courses. My older son, who was not into science, took the required biology and physics or chemistry, but he didn't take AP. And he's an educated young man now, with a college degree. He didn't have to take the AP part. So the idea of having CSP be available as AP or available as honors or just available as a course, a broad access course that all students could have in high school, and that it might be easier for teachers to learn to teach. Is there anything wrong with that idea?
Well, that's a great question. And so, I would bet a nickel that your son didn't go to a school that faces a lot of academic challenges from students. And that's a wonderful thing about the AP, the course and the curriculum. It's a great equalizer that a student in LAUSD at Gardena High School, that your son's biology course was rigorous. But having at Fremont or Gardena or that, it's the equalizer that we know it's actually being taught and that's being taught well. And so that's the only, I think for schools that have not, the challenges that a lot of schools do, I think it's fine. A rigorous course is a rigorous course. But that's the beautiful thing about AP. It's a great equalizer.
We have about 5 more minutes, so we could probably take about 2 more questions.
I'm Angela Hemingway from Idaho, and my question related to online courses for AP in general, but specifically AP Computer Science. In a rural state like Idaho, schools are telling me, Angela, we will never teach this course in our school. We only have 2 or 3 kids that want to take it, or that they feel are competent to take it. So I was just curious your kind of feelings of doing some online coursework to address that.
Our course, both the course itself and the teacher corresponding parallel teacher resources branch are all online, all open source. So in theory, a student could take the course at their own pace without a teacher. Of course, we don't recommend that, but it is possible to do that. And I think that's true maybe for all the other curricula.
Are you, well, go ahead.
Yeah. Partnered with Idaho, but this is a big challenge. We're not actually planning to, we haven't designed our courses online, but it's not designed as an online course for learning, right? And I don't know that we're going to really design for that because our intervention is formally in the classroom to get teachers to teach this course. We also have, we have our K-5 stuff is online and taught. We have pretty good data that shows participation by underrepresented groups goes up substantially when they have a teacher attached to them. So there's a major equity question around that. But I think there's a lot of other CS providers that are purely in the online space. We just don't plan to be in that space.
Lien, the rural initiative in Nevada and Kentucky, is that right? Yeah. How's the College Board addressing that?
Yeah, I think in all of those initiatives, we do take a look at online learning very closely and are trying to, provide more services in the online space. There are MOOCs now. Some folks have developed MOOCs for the CSP course. Dan, you have one, right? Folks out of the University of Alabama also have one. They have one, and so I think that's just sort of in development, and I think there'll be more to come.
Dave Wilbur, University of San Francisco, and appinventer.org. So one question I have is, with CSP, it's a great opportunity. You're getting a bunch of students, maybe for the first time, taking some CS. And one goal there is letting them learn how to build things and create. And my question, I guess, is what's your experience in the first run-throughs of CSP? Are they getting to create a lot, or does the curriculum make it so they don't get as much time to do that? I know for the performance task, it's about an 8 or 12 hour.
A total of 20.
Total of 20, okay, thank you. Yeah. I don't know who said that, but thank you. Oh, yeah. So my question is, how has that gone in terms of creativity, and are we gonna seize this opportunity to really fire kids up about creating things with technology?
I'll just, observation from our curriculum team has been, this has been a huge boon for, to get kids creating. What we've done is, you're building up to performance tasks, so there's create tasks along the way and specific performance projects we put into the curriculum and paste in to really help build that for kids. And they love creating. They love block-based environment to, be able to ultimately program a mobile app. I mean, it's exciting and kids are super engaged. We get testimonials all the time about how much I love the creative aspects of this. And we've been blown away by how creative students can be.
So, we've run this for 5 years now, and so we had 4 years of experience of implementation before the AP exam. And creativity is a huge premise of the course, and it's built into it. How the AP assessment has affected that is an interesting question. When I hear anecdotes about students being proud of certain things they did in the course, it's typically not a performance task submission that they're proud of, and I think that's because of the assessment piece. They know that they're being graded on it, and I mean that's kind of a necessary evil. But I think all of the curricula, like creativity, is a huge component throughout, and maybe the performance task piece itself isn't showcasing that creativity from an intrinsic motivational standpoint, but I think the students in all the curricula really get that throughout.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those, all those comments, but I do worry about this question because, let me give an example. So we're using App Inventor in our course, and App Inventor is an event-driven language, meaning the platform is in a loop, okay? And so to do repeated activities or actions in such a language, you don't need to write a loop often. And so our curriculum is probably short on loops. But, I mean, our CS1 course at Trinity is strong on loops. That hasn't helped, excite students about computer science. Our curriculum does. But we are starting to get teachers saying, oh my goodness, there's all these questions about loops on the exam. We need more loops. And so now, are we going to, revise the curriculum so it passes the exam, or try to keep it more exciting and creative? I think there's a tension there.
We're pretty much at time, okay. So one final comment and then we'll wrap up.
Lynn, why don't you wrap us up?
Well, okay, so, we're talking about the similarities and differences across different curriculum and different implementation. The important thing is that they have all worked towards the same goal. Programming is important, but there's also other things that students are doing in the course too. They're programming, they're making, they're creating, and they're also learning about this thing called the internet. How many of you have used the internet today? Right? Or in the last 30 minutes? Yes. Important things that are relevant to our lives, right? Data is important as well. So all of these efforts, code.org, NSF, have all worked for the same goal, to create this course that's going to excite students, that's going to teach them important things, and that, is going to give them the opportunity to make that choice, go into computer science that they didn't have before. So thank you all for your efforts on that.
Thank the panelists,
really glad
please.
to be here.